Hi, my name is Alex Marianos, and I'll be presenting my media ethics case study on the Wichita experiment. You can follow along on page 41. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm really excited to present my case study to you, the Wichita experiment. This was a really interesting one to present, and we'll get into why in just a second here. Again, if you want to follow along, please join me on page 41 of our media ethics textbook. So just to dive right into some of the facts, you can read those there. But just to kind of go over them, the journalists at the Wichita Eagle, they were initially baffled when they predicted and published in their newspaper that a certain candidate had no chance at winning an election that she was a part of. So what ended up happening is this candidate won, and won by a landslide. And the paper's editor at the time, David Buzzmerritt Jr., actually said, obviously, she knew more about what the people were thinking than what we did. As students at OSU's SMSC program, we know that not knowing about the audience that you're writing to is a huge no-no in the world of journalism. So the paper knew this, and because of this, they actually embarked on a journey to relay information to their audience that the audience wanted to hear. And they also wanted to connect their audience to each other as a community, as well as connect them to the paper. And they also had a third goal of raising the voter rates in Wichita. So this is 2-ply. They wanted to give readers what they wanted, or 3-ply, excuse me. They wanted to give readers what they want. They also wanted to connect to the community, and they also wanted to skyrocket their sales. So we're going to get into kind of how the Wichita Eagle balances this and how they best handle, because this is going to turn into a bit of an ethical issue, as we will see. So who's involved? The journalists who work for this paper are primarily involved, as well as the people they write about and the community or the citizens of Wichita who they're writing to. The journalists are highly involved because as journalists, as we all know, your job is to be the gatekeeper for information for your community. You need to filter all the information you have down into relevant bite-sized pieces for the people who are reading your work, because the information you give them is meant to give them not only joy and something that they actually want to read, but it is also meant to give them useful, helpful, well-informed information that can help them make, the smallest and the largest decisions in their lives. The citizens are obviously extremely affected because they are most directly being targeted by the newspaper. And a lot of what they get, a lot of what they hear is going on, they get directly from that newspaper. And so if the newspaper isn't reporting on necessary, helpful, interesting, community-related events, then they really aren't doing their jobs and the citizens aren't getting the work they deserve. And whoever, in this case specifically, the politicians and their campaigns and their reputations are also directly involved in this case study, because when the Wichita Eagle published that one candidate that she wasn't going to win and there was no way, that includes her. That directly impacts her reputation. That impacts how she's seen in the community, and it could have poorly influenced her running in the race. So now that we know who is directly involved in the case study, let's look at the case study. What's wrong here? Well, the answer is really nothing's wrong here. The Wichita Eagle is striving for very admirable goals. They understand that newspaper sales are declining, and in order to keep their readership up, they have to give their readers information that they not only need, but they also want to hear. Because if you're giving your readers just random information they don't see relevant, they're not going to buy the newspaper, and then the newspaper will tank. But what we're going to get into and how this could be an ethical dilemma is this can be a slippery slope for a lot of newspapers. So because we're going to go through later how the Wichita Eagle trying to combine essentially two important journalistic values, how that can become an ethical issue or, that slippery slope, I kind of want to go through what the Wichita Eagle is doing and what their process is. So firstly, they wanted to engage more closely with their reader, and they wanted their readers to engage closer with each other, and they really wanted to help foster a sense of community. So the way they decided to get the reader to engage more closely with the newspaper is they surveyed 500 people and came up with 10 issues that were of major concerns dealing with any kind of political race that they were going to write about. They were only going to write about these 10 major concerns. So this effort goes hand in hand with strengthening a sense of community and helping voter rates rise, because if people are more involved, it's been proven that the more involved you are in the beginning and understanding a campaign, the more likely you are to vote and to care. But the paper was still missing something. So even after all of this attempt to understand their readers, they missed out on a really big event. So what happened was Operation Rescue, which is an anti-abortion protest, came to Wichita, and according to the case study, almost 1,800 people were arrested, and it really just turned the city upside down. But the Wichita Eagle didn't know what was going on. They were focusing on a different part of the community. They weren't focused on the fact that there could be an anti-abortion protest. So this really is when the journalists uncovered the need for them to have a sufficient knowledge of their community to know what issues would stir their local emotions. So then they began what's called the People Project. And what the People Project is the Wichita Eagle would publish an extensive series of in-depth articles on issues that it had identified as important to its readers. But this time, the articles were framed in a way to encourage responses from the readers, and these responses were sewed in the form of a community discussion, which didn't require any kind of leader. So this incorporated the medium of the newspaper as well as the local television station and radio, and we're literally trying to create a public sphere. This leads us to number 5, where the paper not only creates a one-way communication where it's just paper to community, but what the paper gives to the community allows them to talk and really become closer and talk about what's important to them. So why is this a case study if they're doing everything right? This isn't a case study because of anything right or wrong, or because the Wichita Eagle is doing something so terrible or anything like that. Actually, this is what the book describes as Aristotle's dream case study, because it deals with the golden mean and how this relates practically and literally back to the Wichita Eagle. The Eagle is having to choose how they're going to balance what the readers need and what the readers want, and they're going to have to choose a priority every now and then and decide what is most important for their readers. So earlier I was talking about 2 different kinds of values that the Wichita Eagle is trying to incorporate, and the first is called spinach journalism, which refers to the newspaper. The only role of a newspaper is to tell people what they need to know to be well-informed citizens. And the second value is that the newspapers must tell readers only what they want to know. Because if you only have one or the other, if you only have spinach journalism per se, the articles and the stories run may not be of any interest of all the citizens, which could cause the newspaper to tank. But if you only have what they want to know, it may not be anything relevant, making it not newsworthy, not necessarily timely, and it just won't affect the readers how a credible journalistic source is meant to. So to kind of explain where this can go a little bit more, Sandra H. Dickinson talks about how the pressure of outperforming competition for newspapers can lead to questionable practices and eventually using deception in order to get information, and therefore crossing boundaries of proper ethical guidelines and how to really be a credible journalistic source. So in order if the Wichita Eagle were to go too far in giving the readers only what they want, they would be opening a gateway. So this may seem like an extreme analysis, and that the Wichita Eagle isn't doing that. In fact, they're actually finding their balance. But just to see where it could go and how the Wichita Eagle is doing this well, they are looking to seek truth and to report the truth. And they're doing this by connecting more closely with their community and by getting to know their community. And later in the Code of Ethics set aside by the Society of Professional Journalists, it says that journalists also ought to avoid pandering to lurid curiosity, even if other publications do pander to that curiosity. And what that means is simply don't write just what they want to hear. Sometimes the journalists might need to forego an investigative piece that is really hard-hitting and exciting. Pander. So the ways that they do begin to pander, in my opinion, is when they began their People Project and they published an extensive series of those in-depth articles, because these in-depth articles didn't include anything newsworthy or anything with necessarily verified information, as we can see here again from the Society of Professional Journalists. And the very nature of journalism is to provide people with the facts that they need to know in order to make informed decisions. So if the Wichita Eagle isn't giving facts, but rather, just they're turning it into tabloid journalism, because these publications aren't giving the readers all the information they need to help inform all of their decisions. Rather, they're just giving the readers what they're curious about and what they want to hear about, when there really is so much more than that to be told. And that's where the Wichita Eagle potentially could fall into unethical journalism, because they aren't reporting on their entire scope of knowledge. They're only focusing on a little bit that they know can sell newspapers. So while these examples of tabloid journalism may not seem to pertain to the Wichita Eagle and how they want to satisfy readers, that's because it doesn't necessarily pertain to them. Thank you for watching. I really enjoyed presenting this to you guys, and I hope you have a great night. Go Pokes!